Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for the Research Smarter with the new AI-powered Web of Science Research Assistant webinar. My name is Amy, and I'll be your host for today. So before we start, I'd like to go through a few housekeeping notes before the session kickoff. So if you're experiencing any issues with your audio or visual, just please let me know in the chat box from the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx window. You can turn it on by clicking on the chat bubble icon. This will also be our forms of communication throughout the day. So any questions that you may have regarding today's presentation, please send it to us through the chat box and we will address all the questions at the end of today's session. The session is recorded, so a copy of the presentation and the link to the recording will be sent to you within a week's time. And for today, we have with us Philip Raymond, our Director of Product Management based out of the UK. And now over to you, Philip.
Thank you very much, Amy, and welcome everybody to this session that I'm delighted to be presenting about the Web of Science Research Assistant. As introduced, my name is Phil Ryman. I am Product Director for the Web of Science. I'm based in the UK, so it's an early morning start for me, and I appreciate it's the end of the day for you. So thank you for taking the time out to join us today, and I hope to make this session as useful and as informative for you as possible. I've had the pleasure of leading on the development of the Web of Science Research Assistant, and I'm also the lead for all of our search and discovery functionality, and also our Web of Science researcher profiles. But today, I'm going to be spending this session taking a deeper look at the Web of Science Research Assistant, which I understand your institutions are now set up with trial access for. So I'm hoping that this session gives you a good grounding in the pathway that has led us to the launch of the Web of Science Research Assistant, and to give you a bit of an overview of how we've approached its development and the kinds of functionality that's available to you. So I'm going to spend the first sort of 10, 15 minutes or so just presenting a few slides that give a bit of a background about what we're doing with AI within Clarivate and our approach to how we're developing this for our academic customers. And then I'll focus in particular on the Web of Science Research Assistant before turning across to doing a live demo of some of the features and functionality so that you feel confident going back and trialing the product, and also informing your faculty and your students on how they can get the best out of the product. I'll then be sharing a sneak peek at some of the features that will be coming as we progress throughout the end of this year, but predominantly through 2025, because this is a product that we've launched with its existing functionality, but have really big plans for the additional capabilities that these technologies can bring to users of the Web of Science. Now, please do log questions, as Amy mentioned, in the chat as we go. I am happy to be interrupted if there's something that at the point in time on the slides you really want to ask a question for. I welcome you to come off mute, but by and large I will make sure that there is plenty of time left at the end for questions as we go. So feel free to put anything in the chat that you would like me to clarify about anything that I say, or about the Web of Science Research Assistant functionality in general. So first of all, just as I mentioned, want to take a brief pause to think about how we're approaching the use of artificial intelligence, and particularly generative AI, in our Clarivate products, in particular in our academia and government products. Because we recognize that across academia, institutions are facing a number of different challenges and opportunities around how they integrate the use of AI into their faculty and student workflows. These technologies are amazing at being able to aggregate large quantities of data into new formats and ways of interaction that offer a lot of opportunity for students and faculty in how they can conduct the research life cycle. But we also appreciate that from an institutional perspective, this offers a number of challenges and concerns as well, because as well as being able to actually conduct kind of big data analysis at scale, there is also the risk that students rely too heavily on it and actually reduces their own autonomy within the research process that might actually hinder some of their research skills and their research understanding. So when we looked at the capabilities of these technologies, such as generative AI, we were very keen to ground ourselves in a set of principles about how we introduce this to our products and to the academic market. In particular, we know the importance of partnering really closely with our customers. So actually, the Research Assistant was first made available in a very early beta phase over a year ago now, at the beginning of December, towards the end of November in 2023, with a set of very close development partners that we work with on the development of features for the Web of Science Research Assistant. And those development partners have been key for us to make sure that we are testing and validating the functionality and capabilities and the accuracy of the AI features that we've been adding to the Research Assistant throughout its beta phase, all the way up into the point at which we launched it publicly at the beginning of September this year. We've also been very cautious and careful to make sure that we are adapting and integrating these technologies in a way that really suits specific academic research use cases. So we've looked at all elements of that research lifecycle and thinking about how users interact with the Web of Science today to understand where we can introduce generative AI and broader AI capabilities to assist but not replace some of those skills and some of those responsibilities that researchers have as they are developing their own research strategies and conducting their own projects. The third of those is that we are committed to delivering and basing this technology on content that our institutions and the customers that use Web of Science can trust. We know that generative AI tools are readily available out there, such as ChatGPT, that researchers admit and are increasingly using at more different places within both in their personal and their professional lives. But one of the key concerns about those tools is that they've been trained on very broad brush, very broad general knowledge content that means that you sometimes cannot predict or trust the validity and the origin of the responses that it's generating. So although it might sound very authoritative in providing an answer, it's sometimes very difficult to actually discern whether or not the basis and the content that was based on is coming from a trustworthy source. Now, within Clarivate, we're fortunate enough that we've got incredibly well curated and well trusted content, particularly in the Web of Science, in the Web of Science core collection, which is only indexes journals that meet our editorial standards, on which we can then base the generative AI technologies to give customers the confidence that what they're seeing is based on trusted data. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about how we achieve that in the next slide. The fourth principle here is that we always make sure that we adhere and remain in aligned with our broader publishing agreements and also the rapidly changing area around AI regulations. So, for example, we work very closely with our publishing partners who we index content from to make sure that we're adhering to the publishing agreements that we have in standing with those, that they're comfortable with the way in which we're using their data in order for the purposes of features within products such as the Web of Science Research Assistant. More broadly than that as well, we understand the importance of the privacy and the handling of user data as well. So one example of that is that at no point in time are we using any data about the users of the Web of Science Research Assistant or any of the queries that they are asking in order to help train any underlying generative AI model or large language model. So those are things that we understand are really important to our customers and inform all of our product development around the use of artificial intelligence and in particular generative artificial intelligence. And one way in which that's really manifested itself is something that you might hear about more broadly across our products, within academia and government within Clarivate is the Clarivate Academic AI platform. Now, there's a lot of information to take in on this slide, I appreciate, so I'm just going to talk about the kind of the key principles here. But really, it's a combination of both a technology backbone and AI practices and expertise. Now, the reason we've seen an opportunity here to develop what we're calling this AI platform is that across the products within academia and government, if you think about the ProQuest line of products, the Ex Libris line of products, and also the legacy Web of Science and Insights products, is that they share a number of similarities in terms of the types of capabilities, the types of content, and the types of users that they exist to serve. So if we were to embark on our own journeys in leveraging generative AI technologies, we'd all face the same challenges, such as development expertise, about understanding which is the most appropriate large language models to apply to our particular products' use cases, or to make sure that we're navigating all of the principles and agreements and data handling that we have in place, or how to best navigate issues around assessing quality of those systems as well. So the Clarivate Academic AI platform exists as a centralized platform from which all these products can leverage the expertise and the technologies that we're building. For example, we've centralized the capabilities around generative AI language generation. So all of the services that we have available and all of the different language models that we have available are there for our developers to be able to test and make sure that they fit the right use cases that we're generating value for within our products. Those can manifest, for example, in these research assistants, so these general purpose tools that embed generative AI in them to help users to navigate the types of tasks that they usually experience within our respective products. But not just looking at knowledge research assistants, we can also look at things like metadata assistants. So how can artificial intelligence help us to start capturing more valuable metadata and information about the content that we're indexing to be able to improve the quality and the speed of processing around bringing that content through to our products. And we're also looking at things like analytics and how we can leverage AI and the service and centralize the services for providing much next generation, next level types of analytics on top of our content as well. And in the future, we're thinking about bringing in capabilities such as image assistance, text to speech assistance, or also looking at how we can embed document level assistance as well. So if we've got access to full text, that you're able to actually extract information from the full text as opposed to doing cross database searches. So all of these services are centralized within this academic AI platform to enable developers to lean on and learn and scale these services very, very quickly in their products. It also provides us the grounding from which we can then make sure that these services are meeting the quality standards that we set for each of our products. So how do you set up a process and a system for testing the quality of your large language model search or your natural language search to ensure that it's meeting the expectations of our users? And how do we engineer the prompts and the technology to make sure that we're returning the most relevant results? So this is really the grounding and the platform that sets the Clarivate capabilities apart from what we're seeing elsewhere in the market. So that brings me more specifically onto what I'm here to talk about today, which is the Web of Science Research Assistant. We do have research assistants that are being developed and now available across others of our products. So feel free to seek out more information about those if those are products that you also subscribe to. But here I'm going to talk about specifically the Web of Science Research Assistant. Now, the Web of Science Research Assistant is a generative AI powered tool that is designed to specifically help researchers at all levels of capability to get more out of their interactions with the Web of Science core collection. Now, I emphasized a couple of things there. Firstly, it's a tool that is powered by generative AI. And what I mean by that is that generative AI plays an important part in the way in which you interact with the with the research assistant and the capabilities that you can get out of it. But what I hope to show you in the course of talking about it further and demonstrating its capabilities is that the generative AI only plays a small, one part of an overall package of capabilities that we've engineered around understanding what do users come to the Web of Science to perform? What are those tasks? What are they aiming to do? And how can we package a set of capabilities to help them to get that done more easily and also to get that done faster? For example, we understand that a lot of users come to the Web of Science in order to, for example, understand the basis of a topic more quickly. For example, if they've started a new course at their institution, or if they're exploring a sort of a related field that they want to understand more about. If they're undertaking that kind of task, then the typical things that they want to understand are what is the kind of key, most recent research in this space? What are the foundational papers in that particular research area? How is that research area related to others within a similar field? How has research on that topic developed over time? And also, who are the key researchers in that space? So we can leverage these technologies and our search capabilities and our trusted content to help the users to get there faster without necessarily needing to understand all of the capabilities of the Web of Science to start with. Just as an example of another capability or function that we know users come to the Web of Science for, and that is simply just to find the right journal to submit their article to. We know that a lot of effort and time is lost in the publishing process, just trying to find the right match for your particular paper in terms of which specific field specializes in that subject, but also which are the highest prestige journals, which are the trusted sources that you can then submit your article to maximize the potential for the impact of your research. So again, leveraging the conversational interface of the research assistant, we can use it to request an extract of your article title and also part of its abstract to then match that to journals within the core collection and provide you information about each of those journals to help you make the decision about where to submit it to. So as you can see, and I'll go into detail about these functionalities during the course of this presentation, but as you can see, the generative AI is just one part of an overall package of capabilities here that we've designed specifically to help researchers to navigate the best of the Web of Science without needing to understand it like a pro user might otherwise. So it helps them to not only find content more easily through new ways of interacting and asking and querying the Web of Science, but it will also provide you step-by-step guidance in how you can actually get there. And underpinning all of this is a responsible use of AI in line with the principles that I alluded to at the beginning of the presentation. So one of the key things that I mentioned is that we can leverage the types of technologies here in this conversational interface to help users to interact with the Web of Science in an all new way. So the first of those is by using natural language. Now, for anybody that might not be familiar with that term, what that effectively means is evolving from what has been a specifically kind of keyword-based search. A lot of users might be familiar with doing Boolean-based searches using and or arguments, to being able to query the Web of Science database in a much more natural language way, posing the question as you would speak it to a colleague or another person. The other kind of key capability that the research assistant introduces here as well is the ability to ask those questions in your own natural language, be that in French, in Spanish, in Chinese, whatever. The research assistant will be able to understand those, translate that query in which we can then conduct a Web of Science search, and then be able to provide the response back to you in the language that you are. So this really does help open up the Web of Science to a whole new audience of users who may not have otherwise felt comfortable querying in English previously. Now, where the generative AI capability really comes into force is that once we've then conducted that search and then we've found the relevant results, rather than just presenting those results as a very long and imposing set of search results on a page that can often number into the thousands, if not tens of thousands of documents, we can actually then distill the information that we have indexed about those papers to provide a written response directly to the question that was asked. And so I'll demonstrate some examples of this, but I'm sure that those of you that have made use of generative AI tools already will be familiar with the types of text answers that it can generate. But one of the key things that we saw as an opportunity here with the Web of Science Research System is that Web of Science has access to a myriad of all different types of data. And once we start to understand what the user's intent is and what area of that they're interested in, be that in a topic, in a researcher, or in an institution, for example, we can actually leverage that to present information proactively that is contextual and relevant to the user at that particular time. So if they're interested in researchers, then we can display researcher information in neat, easy tiles to understand their kind of key specialisms and be able to link through to their researcher profile. Or if they're interested in a particular topic, we can then use that to proactively suggest a visualization around how that topic is related to other semantically similar topics within its network. Or if you're interested in a particular paper, you can actually visually plot those papers and how they relate to each other in terms of citation to start to see the network of those papers for you to understand the origin of ideas or where the most impactful research has come from. So leveraging this interaction through conversation and also to understanding the intent of the user, we can serve up this information at a point in time and in a way that makes sense to the user that they wouldn't otherwise need to figure out how to navigate to in the Web of Science. And as I mentioned, some of those task-based guidance that we've got before, I'll introduce you to the ones that we've launched with, but we've got lots of plans here around how we can leverage the conversational interface to take a user step by step through these guided interactions to help them to achieve and solve those tasks that they come to the Web of Science for. So rather than overwhelming them with lots of information in one go, we can understand that if you're looking to explore a new topic, if you're looking to undertake a literature review, we can take you through step by step and present information in an appropriate order and present it in appropriate visualizations to help you to best achieve that task without having to navigate through all of the menus of the Web of Science and understand all of the data that is available to you. And not only does this help you to save time, but it also helps you to uncover areas of the Web of Science that you might not have otherwise come to before. So we're really excited about leveraging this technology to help really solve those workflow tasks that that the researchers are so familiar with coming to the Web of Science for. So that provides some grounding for how we approach the development of the Web of Science Research Assistant and how we are looking at using artificial intelligence and generative AI across our products more generally. But now I want to just switch across to actually showing you the tool in real life so that you can get a feel for how you can start to use this and in your day-to-day workflows and how you can start to inform your users to get the most out of the Web of Science Research Assistant. So here I've actually landed directly on the Research Assistant homepage. For all of those that have got access to it through a trial at the moment, you will see the link to the Research Assistant here in the top navigation. And you can see that that opens its own dedicated interface within the Web of Science to really maximize everything that we can do with this technology and how we can present the information to you. You don't need to be a signed in user to the Web of Science. You can use it as a signed in user. And the key capability that signing in brings you is that you can then see and save your conversation history. So if you want to have multiple threads of different themes and of different tasks underway at any one time, you can keep a history of all of those conversations open at the side. But as I importantly mentioned at the beginning, we're not leveraging any information about the user themselves or the questions that they are asking in order to train or personalize the model to you because we understand how important that data protection is. So I can start a new chat at any particular time. In the main window here, I've got a free text chat box from which I can ask any question to start with. And I've mentioned a few of these guided tasks that the user can then be walked through, such as understanding a topic, performing a literature review, or finding a journal. And as we also understand that sometimes it takes a little bit of a learning curve to understand what kinds of questions are the research assistant able to help me with, we've got some examples that the user can easily click and launch into at the bottom here. But first of all, or in the course of this demonstration, I want to show you three core types of questions that the research assistant can help with, or three categories of types of questions that the research assistant can help with. And the first of those is what I would refer to as natural language search. So I mentioned before that users would typically interact by doing a kind of keyword-based Boolean search, but using the research assistant, I can just actually type it in a way in which I would express a kind of a document search. So show me articles on climate change from the year 2000 with more than 20 citations. So that's a command that effectively can be turned into a Web of Science document search that meets the criteria of the topic of climate change, the publication year limitation of papers published since the year 2000, and of course I've asked it to return papers that have got more than 20 citations. So in all cases here, the first step that the large language model is conducting is understanding each of those different entities, such as a citation number, a publication year, or a topic, but that also could be an institution or a country or a researcher. And it is then turning that into a Web of Science document search and returning the set of results that meet that criteria. Now, understandably, there may be hundreds or thousands of papers that that could meet that criteria, but part of what the research assistant does is determine what are the top articles that meet that criteria on which it can provide a general overview or response to. So as you can see here, it's provided a very brief overview of each of the papers and their core themes, but it surfaces the top 8 most cited documents in that list here. So for this type of query, we've understood that customers are primarily looking for which are the most highly impactful research. So it's actually saying a minimum of 20 citations, but we're prioritizing these by the number of citations that those documents have received. And we've decided for now to default that response to 8 because generally we found that 8 is a good number for users to start to get a feel for a particular research area. And in particular, when we're using this information to generate a response to a research question, we found 8 to be quite a nice sweet spot for the quality of answer that was returned as well. So because my particular query was worded like a search, in here we're prioritizing the display of those articles for the user to interact with. And as you would expect, I can interact with these papers as I would any other search result. So if I wanted to view the particular full record of this particular paper, I can click on the title to then see some of that information in screen, or I can then navigate to view the full record. So it's all very easy and quick to interact with to get a good understanding about what that research is about. Now, as I mentioned, there's probably a lot more than those 8 papers that meet my particular search criteria. And so if I click onto the to view more, then I can view the full set of results in a search. So you can see that based on the particular search that was conducted here, there are actually 3,724 documents that were relevant to that particular search query. So that's an example, first and foremost, of the kind of the first type of interaction that a user might use the research assistant for, and that is to effectively do a document-based search, but to use natural language in order to conduct that. The next level, where things really start to get quite interesting and quite powerful, is to not think about this as a search capability, but actually to think about it as a way in which it can start to answer research questions. So for example, my background is in linguistics. I was particularly interested in the process of humans learning language. So I can ask questions such as, is human language innate? Now, again, the core basis that the research assistant is always following is that it is using the Web of Science core collection in order to provide a search and a response to the user. So it's not using any other trained material, it's not using the broader internet in order to answer the question. It is always turning that query into a Web of Science search, finding the most relevant papers it believes can help answer that question, and returning those in a summary that is then constructed to respond to that particular query. So with that, you can always be confident in the quality of the source of the information that has been used to generate that particular response. And you can see that response on screen here. And one of the key benefits of that approach to how we are leveraging our content is that you can actually see the citations that we use to generate that piece of the response. So for example, in this particular statement here, you can see there's this number 1 next to it. And if I click that, it will then highlight the article that it used or the information from which article it used to generate that response. And importantly, I can then click that to see the abstract information that was then used to actually generate that part of the response. So a key task that we encourage users to do is always scrutinize the response that the research assistant provided next to its source knowledge to make sure that there's been no hallucination, no changes in meaning between what the information was that was provided and the response that was generated by the large language model. So that's a very key piece that resonated really well with our development partners to ensure that you can trust the research assistant and the information that's provided. Now, another key question that we get asked a lot is about how do we ensure that we're providing the most relevant results in order to answer that particular query. And there are a number of different approaches that we can take to this particular challenge, but we make sure that we can actually be as transparent as possible with the users about what that search strategy was. Now, in this case, if I click on this prompt at the top, which was how are these results generated, we explain to the user how we interpreted their question and turned it into a search that we conducted across the Web of Science. And the key technology that we're using here is what we refer to as semantic search. And this effectively means that although my question was stated in quite specific terms, such as human language and innate, we actually can leverage our semantic model to understand that human language may also be expressed as linguistic ability or language acquisition or language development or speech, or innateness can be reflected as innate or inborn or inherent, etc. And using that knowledge, we can then construct what would be the broadest keyword-based search to ensure we're casting the net as wide as possible over what might be the most relevant content. And then once we've returned that pool of those responses, we then have a ranking model to determine which are the results that should respond to that query the most effectively and be the most relevant, and then pass that information about those articles to the large language model to provide the response. So that's kind of the key search strategy there. But as I mentioned many times already, all of that is based only on the content that's included within the Web of Science core collection to ensure that you can trust its key, its knowledge. So as I've mentioned, you can then see the articles and the references that inform this answer. But looking at the answer in a bit more detail, you can see that we provide an extensive amount of information that is largely broken down into a high-level overview. Some of the key themes in that particular space. So for example, around language innateness, there's the idea of there being a biological predisposition. So you're kind of born with the ability to learn a language. How your society and culture might influence your language, and how your brain is then naturally constructed in order to facilitate the learning of language. And then in this case, or in most cases, we then provide a conclusion or a summary that helps guide the user as to what they need to take away and what they might want to look into further. So we've extended the response to provide as much information as possible based on the research that underpins it. Now that we know, and I've shown the reference list already, but now that we know a little bit more about what this researcher is interested in this case, a particular topic around language innateness, we can use that to then provide prompts to what might be relevant material for the user to then explore next. So specifically around a topic, for example, we can show a documents over time graph based on the topic that we've identified from their particular query, in this case, language. So again, this quickly presents visually all of the documents, and I can actually extend this to up to 100 years, how many documents within the Web of Science core collection have been indexed over time on that particular topic. So a researcher might use this to be able to understand, is this a really fast evolving and emerging field of research, or is this something that's got a long established history of research that I want to make sure I go back and understand the origins of? And all of these visualizations are interactive. So for example, if I was specifically interested in the documents on language indexed in 2009, of which there are 4,714, I can just click on that bar graph and it will immediately take me to the full set of results showing those 4,714 documents, from which I can then export and filter and refine, much like I would before. If I wanted to as well, I could either view that full screen or download that as an image that I could use within my research as well. So that's one example of a type of visualization we can show when the user is interested in a topic. The other that I mentioned is around subject relatedness. So one of the key things we know researchers spend a lot of time doing is understanding, okay, if I'm constructing a search strategy, how do I make sure that I'm including all of the right terms in order to make sure that I'm retrieving the most amount of content to me that is going to be as relevant as possible. But I might also want to use this information to understand, where can I start to see emerging areas of research? Where can I follow the trail of this particular subject into something else that might yield new insights or new research strategies? So again, leveraging our semantic knowledge graph, we can actually display that the topic of language is related to these other similar themes that you might then want to follow. But this is not only showing me the relatedness of these topics, it's also showing me the relevant amount of content that we've got about them as well. So the size of the node corresponds to the number of documents within the core collection that we have indexed. So in the case of language, we've got 150, nearly 5,000 documents. But if I was interested in, for example, research around lexicon, you can see it's a much smaller node of around 10,000 documents. And again, I can just click on this node in order to be able to view that set of results. So here I'm seeing the full set of nearly 10,000 results on the topic of lexicon. And the last one that we present here, if I just scroll back up, I've shown the documents over time and the different, the topic map is the top authors. So again, having recognized this person's interested in a topic, we can then show the top researchers in this space as well. So anybody familiar with language acquisition theories will know the name Noam Chomsky. And so I can quickly see a tile of information about this particular researcher, and I can click to see their researcher profile by clicking here as well. So start to give the user the idea of, if this is an area, this is a topic that I'm exploring and interested in, who are the key people and what then and their research that I need to be aware of, or that I'm likely to come across. If I just also scroll back to the list of articles that were generated, we can also present a number of different ways of interacting with a particular paper. So what I've shown so far is the idea that you can kind of view a very macro level insights into something like a topic. But if you start to identify particular research papers that you're interested in, there are also new ways for you to be able to see information about that article in more detail. And the key one that I want to show today is the co-citation map. And this has been really popular with our users since we introduced it as a brand new visualization to the research assistant. And what this is showing is a snippet of the overall citation network that underpins the Web of Science data. In particular, what it's showing here are the top 10 most co-cited documents within that paper's particular network. So it's identified the paper that I targeted here, but then I can quickly see that out of all of the papers that it cites and all of the papers that those papers then cite, these are the papers that come to the top of that list as being the most co-cited papers. Now, the key thing that this might help the user understand is what was the most influential or impactful research preceding that particular piece of research? Where do I need to go back to really understand the grounding of this particular research area? So here we've got a paper by Kirby in 2007 on the innateness and culture and the evolution of language. And I can obviously quickly go and view that document record. And it's showing here the top 10 most co-cited documents that are, or in a tabular view here, that I can then go and explore in more detail. Now, we do also have visualizations available on most of these documents that leverage our enriched cited references data, which is where we actually classify not only where a paper was cited, but how it was cited, such as whether or not it's been cited as part of the background, or whether it's been cited as part of a supporting document, or as part of the discussion. But I'm not going to go into too much detail because I know that we've only got limited time to be able to show you all of the functionality here, but there's certainly a lot of information and a lot of ways for you to start to dig in more detail into where the origins of that paper were and how it's been impactful since its publication as well. Now, I mentioned that there were 3 types of question that a user can ask. So we've done about natural language search, we've done about sort of research questions, and the last is much more of like an analytics type question. And we've got an example here that I'm quickly going to show, which is which institutions published the most on COVID in the last 12 months? Now, this is just an example, but you'd be able to construct anything similar. But again, what we're doing here is recognizing the type of question that was asked, and in this case, not turning that into a document search to be able to provide you a response, but to immediately be able to display those analytics on screen in a way in which you can then interpret and dig deeper. So for example, it's now showing you all articles published in the last 12 months on these particular on the topic of COVID. There was 115,000 results in total here. And then you can see that we're breaking that down on our organizational data within the Web of Science core collection. And again, all of these are interactive. So if I want to dig deeper into those particular papers, I can do so by viewing the set of records here. So we're still allowing very much a kind of discovery-based use case, but we're providing all angles on how a user might get there, either by natural language, by posing the research question that they're interested in, or by looking at it through other ways in which you might be able to state sort of the more analytical question that you might have of our data. And just to finish up, I mentioned at the beginning that we also support natural language querying. And I do have an example of a traditional Chinese-based question here, which I hope has been accurately translated from how does climate change impact biodiversity? And as you can see, in this case, I posed the question in traditional Chinese language script. It is now going to translate that question into an English question in order to provide a search across the English content in the core collection. It's then conducting that search in the same way as it would for English to ensure that you're getting the same experience and the same results regardless of what language you might ask the question in. And then once it's returned that summary, it's translating that back into the language in which you asked. So it's really providing a new window and a new way for interacting with the Web of Science that we've not been able to offer before, leveraging the capabilities of large language models and the translation that they can assist with. So that was very much a kind of a very brief overview of some of the functionality that exists within the Web of Science Research Assistant. There is a lot more. There are lots of different types of questions that you can ask of the model. I haven't demonstrated the different workflows, but I encourage you to go and try those out. In particular, finding a journal to be able to match to a particular subject area that you're interested in publishing in. But I really hope that that provides you with a good grounding on which you can then go and start to explore the capabilities of the research assistant and your faculty in more detail over the course of your trial. Before I turn over to questions, I do just want to provide a bit of an insight into where we are taking the development of the research assistant through particularly in 2025, because we've understood so much about this technology over the course of the last year, in particular with the beta development phase with our development partners, but also to be able to see the different types of questions that users want to ask, the ways in which they want to ask it, and also the rapidly evolving space that is generative AI and the types of capabilities that it can now offer, and that we're seeing the opportunity to bring into these academic use cases. So in terms of some of the recent things that we've added, the new response structure and that expanded semantic search are some examples of the things that we've launched even in the short window since the product was first made available in September. But hopefully before the end of this year, although time is running out, we've also got plans to be able to release the capability for you to ask for different types of visualization. So for example, you saw the example of me clicking on the prompt for a topic map, but we want to give users the ability just to ask for it. So if you want to see a topic map on climate change, you can just type that as a request. It will immediately understand that and present the topic map in the window for you, rather than you having to navigate through the suggested prompt. We also see users ask a lot of questions that are around aggregation. So for example, how many papers were published on COVID in 2022, for example. So slightly different from the institution question, but again, it's a number-based query. And so we're looking at adding those before the end of this year as well, as another way of asking questions of the research assistant. Going into 2025, we see some real capabilities coming through in the types of interaction that we've seen users have already. In particular, the ability to have a kind of a memory of the search as you're asking questions. So this would mean that if you've asked a question to start with based on is human language innate, and we provide a response, that you would then be able to follow up with a question that says, oh, I'm interested in the cognitive capabilities of understanding of learning language. Can you tell me more about that? And it would be able to continue the conversation down. Or if you wanted to ask for different sets of results, like try again, find some different papers based more on citation count, you would be able to ask that kind of follow-on question. We're also adding a lot of capabilities around people. We see a lot of people asking questions around researchers, like who is Eugene Garfield, for example, or how many papers has Lingjin Chen published? What is the recent research by George Davy Smith, for example? And so the ability to ask those kinds of questions will be added in the early new year next year as well, and including a different visualization showing the network of authors through the papers that they've collaborated on. Looking further ahead, one thing that's emerging a lot recently that you might have heard about is the concept of agentic AI. Now, this is going to be really interesting. It's a rapidly moving space where you give the large language model some autonomy about how it goes about answering a question. And where we see this adding value to something like the research assistant here is that there are loads of different types and ways of asking a particular research question. And at the moment, sometimes you have to be quite specific in how you ask that in order for it to conduct a Web of Science document search. But if we start to build in these kind of tool capabilities that an agentic AI can leverage, then something like the literature review goes into a whole new realm of capabilities. So it could help you and to start to construct a more specific search strategy. It could ask you if you want to search different databases. So for example, if you want to include not only core collection, but also want to include things like your preprints access or things like the dissertations and theses, you can start to draw on all different types of source. If you happen to have subscriptions to multiple products within Clarivate's academia and government, then we might be able to show you pathways to get to the full text via a ProQuest search, for example. So we're really seeing a lot of excitement and opportunity around implementing agentic AI, particularly into next year. So we've started off with the grounding of a unique set of functionalities that really helps supplement the Web of Science core collection experience that is available today with the Web of Science Research Assistant, but this is only the beginning, and we see a lot of excitement and opportunity for what we can introduce in the future, and we'd love to have you guys on board. So as I said, I wanted to leave 10 minutes for questions at the end, which I think I've done almost to the minute, which is great. I hope that was a useful oversight for you and you feel confident trialing the Web of Science Research Assistant and advising your faculty and students on how to use it. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to the team or to myself directly. My email address is up on the screen at the moment. And I'm more than happy to take any questions that might have been logged during the course of that presentation. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks so much, Philip. Thanks so much for the informative session today. We actually did get a few questions, so I'm going to start with the
Great.
first one. This was a bit earlier on in your presentation. So the question asks, without mentioning more than 20 citations, would it still be able to provide the 8 most cited articles?
Certainly, yes. So you can ask for that natural language search, you can ask your query in a number of ways. So for example, you could ask for what is the most cited papers on climate change, and it would be able to construct your answer based on the top number of cited documents. But we also built in capabilities for things like most recent research. So if you've constructed a query that said, just show me the most recent research on climate change, we interpret that into the search as a limit that just looks at the most recent 6 months of research. So yes, there's definitely capability to phrase your natural language query in a way that suits whatever your search target is.
Great, thanks for that. So the next question asks, does a provided source also include subscription-based papers from non-open access journals?
So that's a really good question and a point in which I should clarify. So yes, the research assistant is searching across all of the metadata within your Web of Science core collection subscription. So it's not only using open access content. And the reason is that the data that it's using in order to construct the response is being retrieved only from the information that we have indexed within the core collection. So primarily, it's the abstract that's being used for each of the documents in order to inform the response that it's providing, which means that, I mean, there's a kind of pros and cons to each of the approaches, because there are some tools that leverage only open access content, and that enables the large language model to have access to more of the information within that article in order to construct a response. So you certainly get good quality answers when you're using full text sources. But the limitation, obviously, is that historically there's not as much open access content available. There is very important research out there that is not available through open access that might be very relevant to your query. So although the depth of the answer is not as deep if you've not got access to the full text, the research assistant is leveraging the metadata that we have available in order to be able to provide the response. So the great thing is that you've got access to up to 120 years of research. There's no limitation on the depth of the search. And also the key way in which we have constructed the prompt, the model to answer the question, is not to provide a direct answer that would just encourage the user to copy and paste it without reading it and just trust that as the answer, the full answer to their research question. We are a search and discovery database and product. So our key goal is to help the user to find and navigate through the research itself. So the search and the response will provide an insight into the research that supports their research question and encourages them to then navigate to that research to understand it more clearly, rather than just provide a wholesale answer to the query that they then don't need to think about or scrutinize or learn from. So that's the key balance that we've used to make sure that the researcher still has autonomy over how they are interpreting the answer to that query and how they are making sure that they understand the research that underlies it.
Great. Thanks for the thorough clarification, Philip. And the next question asks, so is Web of Science Research Assistant only available to subscribed institutions? Because the person who asked it says they can't seem to find it in the university link.
So the answer, yes, that's a great question. Yes, as it's a feature that is powered by the Web of Science core collection, it is a feature that's available as an additional subscription to existing customers of the Web of Science core collection. That's how it's made available today. Certainly with the academic AI platform, we've been thinking about having sort of AI as a service available sometime in the future. But yeah, the Web of Science Research Assistant is available as an additional subscription to customers of the Web of Science core collection.
Great, thanks for that. And the next question asks, so we usually cite the name of databases we use to search articles in systematic review. So how can we cite if we use the Clarivate system?
Yeah, that's a great question again. We've had a few inquiries about this, and I believe it's a feature that the team are aware of, and I believe planning to launch quite soon, which is guidelines on how you can cite the response. Now, this is something that's evolving very quickly within the market anyway. In fact, I think a number of the very popular referencing systems such as APA and Chicago, etc., have their own guidelines for how you can cite responses that from AI. We would, for now, suggest following quite similar guidelines to what's being proposed there, such as the source as the Web of Science Research Assistant and the query that was posed. And we have inbuilt capability for a user just to be able to copy the response in order for them to be able to paste that elsewhere. I think this is an evolving area of guidelines of how you can cite it. We do facilitate that, and we'll be adding more capabilities around that in the future.
Great, thanks for that. And the last question for today, unless something else comes in, which sorry, let me start again. In your demo of which institutions published the most on COVID in the last 12 months, may I ask, where is the data source used in the bar chart? And is the data extracted from Web of Science by the researcher assistant AI?
So yeah, so the underlying data is always coming from the metadata that we index as part of our document records. So particularly with institutional data, we invest a lot into normalizing that information across all of the content that we index. So for example, we know that University of Manchester, for example, might be captured slightly differently on whichever research outputs. It might be univ.manchester, University of Manchester, Manchester University even. So any content that we index and normalize into a hierarchy of organizational institutions. So everything will be resolved in that case to University of Manchester. And in some cases, there might be other hierarchies within institutional networks as well. So like, for example, Florida has a state system of institutions. And so the representation here is always coming from our normalized organizational data and taken from the same level within that hierarchy. I hope that responds enough to the question that was posed.
Great, thanks for that. So if I believe your answer would have been thorough enough, but if not, you guys can always reach out to
Yeah,
Philip
please do
or your
follow up.
account manager or to Renee, who'll be more than happy to help you out with to explain further on your questions. And that's all the questions we have for today. So I'd like to thank Philip once again for presenting for us today on the Web of Science Research Assistant. And for everyone else, we will be sending out the recording and a copy of today's presentation within a week's time. So just watch out an email for the content. And if you don't see it, just, maybe sometimes it falls into your junk box. So just, check that out because it might have fallen in there. And I'd like to wrap up today's session. Thank you once again for participating in today's session. And there is a survey that pops up after you close your WebEx screen. So please help us fill out the survey so we know how we did and also to get some feedback and comments from you. And thank you once again. And I hope to see you all at our future events and webinars. Thanks, Philip.
Thank you very much, everybody.